gonna make this as short and as clear as possible. If you find any Christmas presents under your tree after Christmas Day that you didn't place there, call the police, leave the house immediately, and whatever you do, do not open the gift. I lived with my wife Maria and my 2 young boys in Melbourne, Australia. That's where my wife is originally from, and most of her family lives less than an hour from us. On Christmas Day, we usually have a lot of presents under the tree. Gifts from me, my wife, gifts from my grandparents, from the boys, they're all placed there. That's why last Christmas, we weren't worried when I found a present under the tree that neither me or my wife had put there. It could have easily been from one of our parents when they came to visit on Christmas Eve, or it could have easily been from one of the boys, or from so many other people. We just didn't give it a second thought. It had no gift tag on it, so we decided to leave it there and not open it until we found out who it was for and who sent it. The day after Christmas, I got up early to make coffee, and that was the only present still left under the tree. It was a small box, maybe 6 inches tall and 6 inches wide, wrapped in bright red wrapping paper. There was a little green bow on top, and it all looked expertly wrapped. But when I came into the living room that morning, there was something off about the present that I couldn't place. It wasn't until later that I realized the wrapping paper had been completely green on Christmas Day, and it wasn't until later that I noticed that red had leaked on the floor around the present as well. Throughout the day, our kids played with their new Christmas loot as Maria and I called different relatives asking if they left a little red gift under our tree. As the day went by, more and more family members told us they hadn't sent a gift, and we started to get confused. We weren't worried by any means, but we were definitely puzzled. There had been no signs of a break-in or any forced entry, but the gift had to have come from somewhere. Mary and I spent the entire day trying to figure it out, and when night came around, we were mentally exhausted. We put the kids to bed and followed soon after. Now, I'm usually a pretty heavy sleeper, but something woke me up that night. I'm not sure if it was a noise I heard or if I just had too much coffee during the day, but I found myself wide awake at 2 a.m. and my throat was dry as hell. I slid out from under the covers and slipped into my slippers, careful not to wake Maria sleeping next to me. I walked out of our bedroom to the kitchen, almost slipping on some spilled water on the floor. Muttering a curse, I turned on the kitchen light and poured myself a glass of water from the refrigerator. I stood there in silence for a few minutes, drinking my water as I leaned against the kitchen counter. My mind was occupied with travel plans. We were actually going to Japan for New Year's, and when I finished the water, I put my glass in the sink and turned around to turn off the light. By pure chance, I happened to glance over to the hallway that connected to the living room, and that was when I froze. From where I stood, I could see right to our Christmas tree, and I saw that the mysterious present had been opened. What I had almost slipped on, what I had first thought was spilled water, was revealed to be a trail of bright red blood leading from the open present towards the bedrooms. My body was frozen in shock for a few minutes, but I quickly snapped out of it. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife we had, and I crept over to the hallway, careful not to make a sound. My heart was racing as I followed the trail of crimson back towards the bedrooms, and my blood froze when I realized that it was leading me into the boys' room. I stood outside the bedroom doorway for just a moment, trying to build up my courage for whatever waited me in the darkness. Then I sprang into action, running into the room and switching on the lights in one quick movement. I had tried to prepare myself, but what I saw made the knife slip out of my hand and my jaw drop in horror. My boys had twin beds, one on either side of the room. Micah, the oldest, was on the left side, and Jamie, who was a year younger, was on the right. I saw Micah first, sleeping soundly and wrapped in his sheets. But when I turned to Jamie, I almost threw up. His sheets had been thrown off the bed, and he was sprawled out across his mattress in an unnaturally rigid pose. His limbs were bent back in ways that no bones should be able to move, and his unseeing eyes were open and staring up at the ceiling. Blood covered his pillow, his mattress, everything. Attached to his neck was the most hideous thing I've ever seen. It was like a cross between a leech and a slug, and was easily almost 2 feet long and almost a fourth of that in width. And the thing was latched onto his neck. It was smooth and slimy and dark green, almost the exact same color of a Christmas pine. But as I stared at it for a moment, I realized it wasn't attached to his neck. It was in his neck. The creature had torn open Jamie's throat and had burrowed its head into the exposed wound. As I stared on in horror, I saw the thing pulse and writhe as it fed off my dead son's blood and God knows what else. For a cursed minute, I couldn't move. I couldn't even look away. I stared on in frozen horror before I finally tore myself away, grabbed my son, and stumbled back into the hallway. I knew Jamie was dead without having to check, and I knew that I had to call the police, but I think I was going into shock because all I could think of in the moment was to stagger into the living room to inspect the present. It was then that I saw the box was logged through with blood, and the top of the box had been ripped off by the creature that was held inside. There was something in there that I couldn't make out, which the police later identified as a dismembered hand, most likely put there to feed the creature once the box had been sealed. Yet when I bent down to inspect the box, I saw a small scrap of white paper that was perfectly unstained by the blood. I picked it up with shaky hands, and I was barely able to make out the words written on it in impeccable cursive. It read as follows: "This is the gift that awaits everyone on the naughty list. Let it be a warning to you all. Cole is hungry, and he will feed. Merry Christmas, SC." It was sometime in December before Christmas. I was about 8 years old. Me and my older brother Michael had just gotten out of school and were walking home with a few of my brother's friends. We lived a good distance from the school that we went to, so our parents arranged it so that after school we could walk to my brother's friend Harry's house until one of our parents got off of work and could come pick us up. My brother and his friends were all about 12 years old and were at that strange age where kids try really hard to be cool, often saying and doing things without really thinking about what they were doing, hoping that out of one of these various desperate actions, one of them would impress those around them. It snowed a lot where we lived, so every day on the way home, they would hide behind a snowbank and pelt the cars passing by with snowballs. I was always a nervous child, so their hobby always involved me imploring them to stop so we can go home, which almost always earned me an onslaught of snowballs myself thrown in my direction. On this particular day, my brother and his friends decided to try throwing snowballs at the pedestrians walking down a fairly popular street. It wasn't called Main Street, but it might as well have been. At one point in the road, the shop stopped, and at the other end of the block, there was a suburb. People in this suburb would often walk from their houses to the shops, since it wasn't unusual for the roads to be covered in ice. My brother's friends picked a spot for their sniper's nest. It was in a vacant lot next to one of the last shops on the street, which sort of marked where the shops ended. They figured this spot would provide a good flow of pedestrians and an adequate amount of snow. They built a half-circle wall of snow that went almost up to their chests that they were very proud of. They hid a few adults, most of whom were taking it well and often returning fire. A few of them threatened that they knew who our parents were and that our parents would be hearing about this. Michael and his friends decided that they should wrap it up and head home, but not before they had one more victim. They waited and watched at the edge of the building, anxious for their next prey. An elderly man slowly made his way down the street. He had a black wooden cane which shook as he walked, as though the weight of the world was being supported by it. One of my brother's friends decided that given the fragility of the old man, they should let him pass and wait for another target. My brother wasn't having it. Eager to prove how rebellious he was, my brother threw a snowball and hit the old man with a solid shot to the side of the head, knocking off his hat and exposing underneath a shiny bald head. The old man had been startled by the attack and looked frightened for a moment. After seeing us, his fear melted into a smile and a laugh. The man bent slowly and painfully to pick up his hat, wiping it off and placing it back on his head. He spoke in an accent I had yet to hear at that age. "Be careful, young ones. Der Krampus is watching," and continued walking with a smile. My brother and his friends looked at each other with confusion on their faces. My brother, still caught up in his annoying need to prove himself, decided he needed to bring the prank to a new level. He ran up alongside the man, snatching the cane from his arthritic hand as he passed. The old man went down face first, instinct making the hand opposite to the cane try to break his fall, to no avail. He landed hard and helplessly. A pain-filled cry came from the old man. My brother instantly realized that he had gone too far. He walked slowly towards the old man, his eyes wide.
"Mister, are you okay?"
he said as he crouched down next to the old man, who now appeared to have passed out or died. "Is he alive?" one of my brother's friends asked. They were standing around the old man's body. My brother put his ear up to the old man's mouth, trying to find a sign of life. Everyone held their breath, wide-eyed with fear. My brother leaned in closer, desperation clear on his face. Suddenly, the old man's hand grabbed my brother's jacket by the collar and pulled his ear up to his mouth. He spit a blood-curdling growl of angry foreign words into my brother's ear. I don't think I've ever seen a face display such anger. Once he had finished the string of what I assumed were foreign curse words, he released my brother from his grip. We turned and immediately ran to Harry's house, not stopping or talking all the way. None of us spoke about what happened with the old man, other than to agree on an alibi for where we were in case we got in trouble. The night went on, as any night typically did. We ate dinner, after which my brother and I went to do homework in the room we shared, while our parents went to the living room to drink. We weren't allowed to listen to the radio while we did homework, as Dad said it would be too distracting, so we worked in mind-numbing silence. Silence until a few quiet scrapes at the window. The kind of scraping sound that catches the glass at just the right angle and makes that skin-crawling sound. We both turned and looked at the window. The upper corner of the window had been cleared of frost and snow, leaving a strange pattern on it, as if cleared away with a crude brush made of fine twigs and grass. Nothing could be seen through the clearing, just darkness. Both scared, we ran to our parents and told them that someone was in the yard and that they were looking through our window. Our father went outside to investigate. A minute later, he came back, laughing a little. "You boys had a visitor, all right. A deer. There are hoof prints all over the side of the house. Probably scraped his antlers on the window." Later, by the time we finished our homework, it was time for bed. We changed and got in our beds, and all was quiet as I slowly fell asleep. And then, the sound of a door opening. The front door. I could hear it swing open and hit the wall. Something I had been scolded for doing several times. I remember thinking that it was strange that my dad would open the door and not close it behind him. The footsteps coming in sounded strange, too heavy, as though there was a very large man wearing heavy boots walking through our living room. The sounds of the 2 feet were accompanied by a third sound, this one less heavy, with a wooden tone to it. My eyes were fixed on the door, and at this point all I could see was the wall of the hallway, which was dimly illuminated by a streetlight shining through the living room window. The deep thuds continued deeper into the house. I could tell it was getting closer to the hallway with each step. It was at that point that the thing walked past the light being projected on the hallway wall. I couldn't believe the shape I had seen. This must be a nightmare. I clenched my eyes shut, hoping that when I opened them again, I'd be back in the waking world, in my bed, doors closed, everyone sleeping. I kept my eyes shut. The footsteps continued. They slowed in pace as they reached the doorway to our room. Then, a grunt. This person didn't grunt like most people. Their grunt was accompanied by a quick, deep exhale. I could hear slow, steady breathing at the doorway. Maybe it was just my dad, I thought. I decided to open my eyes. It stood still in the doorway, taking up most of the opening. It stood there for what seemed like minutes before it lowered and tilted its head to the side, moving through the door. It had to do this maneuver just to fit its head through the doorway. On either side of its head were 2 curved sticks pointing toward its back. Horns. This person had horns. As it came into the room, I could make out more of the creature. Its body was strange and big and appeared to be covered in matted fur. It carried a large dead branch as a walking stick. Its back was big and misshapen. It was too round. The creature smelled of mold and dirt, as if it had been rotting underground. It made its way over to Michael's bed. I noticed at this point that my brother had been awake this whole time too, also paralyzed by fear. The beast was almost to his bed when he began screaming. He tried to jump out of bed but was stopped by the thing's black claw. The thing grabbed Michael by his arm and pulled him closer, grabbing him by the neck. It lifted him up until he was eye level with the beast. My brother wriggled and screamed, trying his best to escape the creature's grasp, but his attempts were futile, as the beast had incredible strength, and my brother's struggle didn't even move him in the slightest. My brother eventually gave up and hung there, crying. The beast brought my brother's face close to his. A long, red tongue exited the beast's mouth, licking the tears from my brother's face. It savored each tear as though nothing could taste better. At the time of the incident and many years later, I thought the word the old man spoke was Grumpus or Krampus. It wasn't until years later that I stumbled upon an article online about Krampus. You can imagine my shock at the discovery that the most horrific experience of my life had ties to an ancient myth. Such a discovery has led me to believe that perhaps the experience I had convinced myself was a hallucination was not one at all. Perhaps it's the world we live in, the very existence we're taking part in.